Well, welcome to Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only LGBTQ daily evening news. It's time to queer up the news. LGBTQ world, it's 7 p.m. Wednesday, January 20th, and we are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. The world's first live daily queer evening news show. Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight. Well, thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. This is a live, unedited LGBTQ evening news show. So whatever happens, you're going to see it. This evening, we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ community from South Florida, America, and across our world. I'm your Queer News Tonight anchor, Al Ferguson. And tonight, let's welcome anchor Faye. What? She's out, she's proud, and she's certainly loud. She's a Latina to be reckoned with. Half Puerto Rican, half Colombian, and 100% freaking Jersey. She is a radio personality and has the popular blog and YouTube channel, Faye What? I'm contractually obligated to repeat that twice.
You are.
Aiming to unite the L and the G in LGBTQ, she's also a board member of the Unity Coalition, a hostess and MC for many South Florida events, and an animal advocate, and the owner of Faye's Fur Family, dedicated to providing excellent service for your pets. Good evening, Faye.
Hola, mi gente. So happy to be here. Got my pearls, baby. Got my pearls.
Got my pearls and clutching them tightly. Let's also welcome anchor Taisha Best. They are a queer, Latinx, polyamorous, femme presenting genderqueer switch whose transformative healing is completely connected to their leather and work career. They speak and write about sex, culture, politics, their fight for racial justice, gender inclusivity, and accessibility, and loves working on policy and program development. They also serve as our queer community builder host on Happening Out Television Network's discussion and debate show, Gay Town Hall, alive every Thursday night at 8 p.m. And just recently, Taisha has moved back to Florida from California to continue their career as an aeronautical sustenance engineer. Good evening, Taisha.
Hey, good evening, America. Welcome on board. I'm excited to be here, and as any aeronautical sustainer, I have to give you the tip to continue wearing your mask at the airport and also for the duration of your flight.
Exactly right. Well, tonight we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Wednesday, January 20th. Let's begin by queering up breaking Q news. For LGBTQ America, the number 46 may be the most important number ever, the inauguration of Joe Biden. Today, LGBTQ America witnessed one of the most unique moments in our history, with the door closed on Donald J. Trump and the new dawn of the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Trump leaves the Capitol in the early morning with little fanfare. He offends, even in the last moments, to not participate in the 230-year history of America's peaceful transition of power. He offends by leaving while still president so he may fly here to South Florida on Air Force One. He is the first president in our modern history to not wait until after the inauguration to fly home and then fly on the jet designated as Air Force Special Flight. He offends as being our neighbor here in the gayest place on planet Earth. But the long nightmare of the last 4 years is now over. Today's inauguration was a return to normalcy and the hope of America, our dreams for the LGBTQ community.
Highlights include Lady Gaga and Jennifer Lopez, but more the bipartisan support of the transition of America. Biden's speech was particularly stirring as he stood just feet away from where doors, windows, and American hearts were broken just 2 weeks ago on the sedition of attack on our democracy.
Vice President Pence was endangered from that attack. So ironic today, he he sits on the inauguration stage as President Biden says he wants to represent all Americans. He loudly declared, quote, "This uncivil war must end," unquote. His speech will be remembered in history when he says, quote, "Democracy has prevailed," end quote. Perhaps most moving was Garth Brooks singing an a cappella version of Amazing Grace, asking all participants and likely the largest television inauguration audience in history to sing the last verse along with him.
It is a shared moment for the LGBTQ community that has been long awaited. We arrived today. Joining us live now is Michael Lavers, the noted international news editor of one of the world's leading LGBTQ newspapers, the Washington Blade. He has spent the day at the inauguration, and we are extremely proud to bring his perspective on the historic moments the LGBTQ community witnessed today. Good evening, Michael.
Hi, Al. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, first, I have to echo sentiment. I'm a very big fan of the Washington Blade. I love our local and regional, of course, the Blade is also national, media in representing our LGBTQ community. And the Washington Blade does it just about the best on this planet, especially in its political coverage. And so we welcome you tonight. Michael, so you're at the Capitol today for the inauguration. Tell us about your experience.
Yeah, I was actually, I wasn't at the Capitol, but I was in downtown DC just checking out what was going on with the security crackdown and just how folks were commemorating this very important day in our history here in this country. And we'll talk a little bit more about what happened at the Capitol on the 6th of January, 2 weeks ago today. But because of that, DC was essentially under lockdown. We had upwards of 25,000 National Guard troops throughout the city. I'm in DuPont Circle. I'm a few blocks north of the White House, and they were pretty close to where I'm talking to you all right now, just to give a little bit of perspective. But there were definitely a lot of concerns going into today with security and President Biden and Vice President Harris's safety because of what happened 2 weeks ago. Thankfully, there hasn't been any issues at all with security and incidents such as, incidents that would cause folks to be concerned. But it was a very tense few days leading up to today, and we all have, honestly, all of us here in DC, I think, have really taken a deep sigh of relief, not only for the fact that the inauguration went off without a hitch today, but that we literally saw Donald Trump fly out of DC at about 8:30 this morning. And it's a moment that many of us here in DC have been waiting for 4 years. And it finally happened.
Let me be the first, however, in what we call affectionately here in South Florida, the gayest place on planet Earth. We are never going to forgive our brothers and sisters in Washington for you sending him our way. We're never going to forgive you.
You have my regrets. I nothing to do with that. I sympathize with you guys for sure.
Exactly, and it's going to get worse. Ivanka's to the south of us now, and he's to the north of us now. We're pinned in and surrounded, but we'll survive, Michael. We'll survive.
Keep hope alive.
Exactly. Yes. I'm curious, what's the LGBTQ community in Washington directly? What's the reaction been over the last couple of weeks leading up to today's events?
Yeah, I think, the LGBTQ community, along with everybody else, was just disgusted by what happened on Capitol Hill on the 6th of January. And it's important for folks in South Florida who may not be familiar with DC is that, we're not only just the city where the federal government is, we're a very vibrant, active city with a very strong, active, and vibrant LGBTQ community. We have over 700,000 people who live here in DC. I'm a DC resident myself. And what happened on the 6th of January for all of us here was just such a traumatizing experience. And it really upset those of us who live here that these folks, and it's important to note that most of the people who stormed the Capitol weren't even from DC. So in essence, they were invading our city and invading our the temple of democracy, as folks call it, the Capitol, which means so much to not only us here in the US, but around the world. And just to see what happened on the 6th of January was such a shocking thing for people around the world, but especially for us here in DC. This is our city, and we had these folks come in that don't represent DC values and don't represent us as an LGBTQ community and so forth. And it was just a very, very sad and tragic thing to see, and people were understandably very upset about what happened.
And Michael, to that point, you, on behalf of your seat at the Washington Blade, you had firsthand seat in participating, or at least observing what was happening on January 6th at the Capitol. Tell us about what that experience was, and your impression representing media, which you're hated along with everyone else as fake news. What your reaction was in what unfolded in front of you on Wednesday, January 6th?
We had a sense that something was potentially going to happen. Of course, we didn't realize just how horrible it was going to be, but it was advertised days ahead of January 6th that supporters of Donald Trump were going to come into DC, attend this rally at the Ellipse by the White House, in opposition of efforts to certify the Electoral College results. And so we knew that was going to happen, and there was real concern even leading up to that day about, violence, because we've had protests here since the election where, unfortunately, Trump supporters have clashed with folks and police, and we've had vandalism and damage of property and so forth. So there was a concern going into January 6th. The mayor here, Muriel Bowser, even advised folks not to go downtown on that day. So on one hand, we weren't surprised that people were coming in. What none of us expected was that these folks were going to march to the Capitol and basically stage an insurrection. And also nobody could have foreseen Donald Trump inciting his supporters to do that. I think that was the most shocking part of a very shocking day, was that here you have the president of the United States inciting his own supporters to stage an insurrection at the Capitol. And that's exactly what we saw. So that's the backdrop to, leading up to that.
I'm curious, as this was unfolding and you were watching it, were you shocked that among the participants were people carrying rainbow flags, the rainbow flag that was dragged through the broken window? We are reporting and discussing the FBI arrest of some of the protesters that were that are members of the LGBTQ community. Did that wash over you in any way as you were watching this unfold?
Yeah, honestly, when I was around the Capitol, I only saw one rainbow flag, and it was on the east side of the Capitol. It was actually the same set of steps where now former Vice President Pence left the Capitol after the inauguration, which was rather ironic to me, having been there 2 weeks ago. I saw one rainbow flag. Being in the midst of an event like this, I honestly didn't realize how serious it was until I was able, I was fortunately safe. Nothing happened to me. My colleague, who was even closer, called me and said she was leaving because she felt unsafe. So of course I said, get out of there and get safe. So at any rate, we were fine, but I didn't realize just the severity of what was happening until I was able to get home about 4 o'clock. I rented a bike to go down there. That's how I was getting around, and I rode back home. And only when I turned on the television and saw the live images of folks literally storming into the Capitol, going into the House and Senate chambers, and these just horrific images and videos of the insurrectionists, chasing police officers and so forth. That's really when I realized just what a horrible situation what was going on. But in terms of the community, I only saw one rainbow flag.
Michael, has it washed over you yet that on behalf of our community, you were in a unique seat to watch history? Wednesday 2 weeks ago, we have the insurrection at the Capitol. Wednesday, a week ago, you're in proximity to the impeachment, the second impeachment of the President of the United States. And today, you watch that person impeached twice leave office and the new inauguration. You've sat as the international news editor at the Washington Blade, sitting right in the center of those 3 history-making Wednesdays. Has it washed over you yet what that means to you?
Yeah, I mean, part of our job as journalists is to document history. And, on one hand, we have a job to do, but certainly it's not lost on me just the tumultuous events of the last 2 weeks. Again, I live in DC. This is my city. My husband lives, this is our city. And to just, be present at these events, that's not lost on me. And I also realized too that, the world is watching us. I was getting messages from my friend in Cuba about 2 hours ago, and it was a picture of Lady Gaga singing the national anthem. He was watching that on his TV in rural Cuba. So, the world is watching what happens here in DC, and we're so incredibly fortunate to have the chance to document that and to also just have a front row seat to history. That's something that's never lost on me.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, Michael, we appreciate you being with us on this momentous day at Queer News Tonight. And to everyone listening to us, we encourage you, go to the Washington Blade's site. Arguably the best, especially from a political perspective for the LGBTQ community in the United States. You should look at the Washington Blade. Michael Lavers, the international news editor for the Washington Blade, thank you very much for being with Queer News Tonight this evening.
Thank you so much, Al.
Thank you, Michael. Any final thoughts
Okay.
about the inauguration?
So much. I'm clutching my pearls out. If you weren't able to see the inauguration, folks home, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of everything that Faye felt, okay? All right. Can we say that Michelle Obama's blowout was incredible? It was everything. Gaga was a vision with the bird on her chest. J-Lo looked beautiful and represented Latinas to the fullest, but she still can't sing. But she looked beautiful. Kamala was just bella. And when she walked down with her niece, I cried. Real lesbian tears. Amanda Gorman, where has she been all my life? I am following you everywhere. I might start stalking you, girl. You are just incredible. Biden's speech was exactly what I needed. It gave me hope. And Pence was there.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Titus?
I mean, for me, I definitely had a strong reaction to Amanda Gorman. 22 years old, has a book coming out on Amazon, releasing in September. I definitely cannot wait to read her poem and text, especially for those of us who are hard of hearing. The others stand out other than the fashion. Thank you, women, for slaying that entire ceremony. Is the fact that though Biden gave us in words what many people of color are hoping can be put into action, I am looking forward to the next 100 days to see what implementation and policy development that he does that will not only roll back a lot of the toxic racist policies that was in America, but also bring forth some new soil of which to build a better foundation for this country.
I agree with both of y'all's observations, both culturally and politically, by the way. I think the events of yesterday with the COVID memorial that took place, and especially today in watching the president force the label of Air Force One to fly home here to South Florida, and then what we watched in terms of the transition, I think the events are so large that it hasn't even washed over us completely yet. I think this is going to take days, perhaps weeks of digestion of how important where we are sitting in history. We sat in the middle of history today, and really for the entire month of January. It's been amazing. Let's move on into some other headlines for today, and that is queering up business. New York City now is the largest U.S. city to grant LGBTQ business access to minority contracts. New York City now recognizes LGBTQ-owned companies as minority-owned businesses, now making them eligible for billions of dollars in city contracts, as well as access to consulting, mentorship, educational programs, and other resources. The new designation, announced Tuesday by the New York City's Department of Small Business Services in partnership with the National LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce, will fast-track LGBTQ-owned businesses into city certification programs, including the Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprises, or MWBE program. Justin Nelson, the Chamber's president, said in a statement, quote, "New York City has a legacy of leadership in promoting inclusivity at every level of public life. LGBTQ entrepreneurs in New York City will now have the opportunity to create jobs and develop innovations that benefit all who live there," end quote. New York is now the largest city in America to incorporate LGBTQ business in minority contracting and procurement opportunities, but it follows similar efforts by numerous other cities, including Chicago, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Nashville, Tennessee, and Philadelphia, and even several states, including California, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania.
Next, we queer up entertainment. Shonda Rhimes calls out Hollywood players for lack of LGBTQ representation. After GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, released their annual Where We Are on TV report for 2020, showrunner and producer Shonda Rhimes has said that she's not okay with being the only straight person who made GLAAD's cut. The Hollywood mogul, who has brought us Bridgerton, Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, and How to Get Away with Murder, is one of 4 other, quote, out power players, end quote, GLAAD says helped make 2020 have more representation for LGBTQ people on our TV screens. According to GLAAD, an LGBTQ-focused media monitoring organization, Ryan Murphy, Lena Waithe, Greg Berlanti, and Rhimes were responsible for 17% of all LGBTQ representation on TV last year. With their combined 16 various TV series, the report attributed 62 out of 360 overall characters who were LGBTQ who showed up on screens last year as characters contributed by the foursome. The report emphasized that this means that, quote, nearly 1 in every 5 LGBTQ characters that appeared on a series, end quote, was because of them. In tweets surrounding the news, Rhimes shared that she was bothered by the fact that she was the only straight person to be part of the group's achievement. As she sees it, the problem of people not prioritizing the representation of marginalized groups they don't identify with always seems to be the problem surrounding diversity in Hollywood and on screen. According to her, the lack of LGBTQ representation likens that of failed racial representation.
Moving on, next we queer up politics. History, Black, Asian, women. Watch this.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. And to the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. But know that we will applaud you every step of the way.
With all the history that was made today, the end of the Donald Trump era was noteworthy. The inauguration of Joe Biden and the environment of the January 6th attack on the Capitol and COVID-19 pandemic is the lead story. However, in any other election cycle, the absolute headline would be the inauguration of the first woman, first Black woman, the first Asian American woman vice president. That is the history of today for the inauguration of Kamala Harris. For 4 long years, the hollow lie was bantered that Donald Trump was the most pro-gay president in history. It was a lie, told hundreds of times to try to make it true. So the world's first LGBTQ live television news, Queer News Tonight, is proud to say today, Kamala Harris is the most pro-LGBTQ vice president in history. The LGBTQ community celebrates this moment. We know tomorrow the politics of division will resume in one form or another, but today, the significance of this moment is hard to even understand. A Black woman is vice president of the United States of America. Amazing when you consider Harris has an LGBTQ chief of staff and now becoming the #1 seat for the Democrats as a presidential nominee after Joe Biden. Everyone at Queer News Tonight, especially after our last 4 years, cheers and celebrates the enormity of this moment.
An older white guy says a Black woman is vice president of the United States. That's it.
That's it.
I'm ecstatic. I think this is a step in the next million steps that Black women, Asian women, other women of color are going to be taking in terms of taking the reins of leadership in order to diversify and provide equity in our government offices.
It was just an amazing, amazing moment in history to see her today. I'm not a crier. Unless you hurt my dog, I don't cry. And I was bawling. I mean, it was amazing to see brown representation up there. I mean, thank you. Too happy.
A big day, no doubt. Next, we're going to queer up gay culture. And let's do something a little lighter. From Russia with love and the beautiful photography of Andrei Vishnyakov. At Queer News Tonight, we bring artists, writers, photographers, and other creative forces to LGBTQ America's attention. So as we close the door on Trump and open a new and more positive worldview, we bring you noted photographer Andrei Vishnyakov. He brings hypersexual Russian men to all of LGBTQ America's attention. We're showing you some of those images now. Perhaps his beautiful images will help ease tensions. And now that Trump is gone, between our two countries, perhaps tensions will lessen. Well, maybe not. But Andrei posted a message on his birthday this week, quote, "A year older, but not a bit smarter. A boring year when we all had to participate in some kind of collective nonsense, while models from gods turned to mortals. Fortunately, I have endless archives in which I can swim endlessly, fishing out pearls from the bottom," end quote. The timing of that could not be more perfect, with the transition of American politics with Russia continuing to be considered a political adversary. LGBTQ America has an obligation to continue to place Russia's deplorable LGBTQ positions under scrutiny. After all, we just got rid of our white, toxic, masculine president. Perhaps it's time Russia does the same with Vladimir Putin. So these magical images will delight both the Russian and American LGBTQ communities. We encourage you to reach out to Andrei on his Instagram, Facebook, or Patreon social media.
Next, we queer up the world. 3 Polish women face up to 2 years in jail for LGBTQ+ friendly poster. 3 LGBTQ+ activists in Poland have been put on trial for carrying posters that showcase the Virgin Mary and Jesus with rainbow halos. Back in April 2019, Lizbita Palina, Anna Prus, and Joanna Gizra Poslander carried the posters during a peaceful pride protest. The 3 women are facing up to 2 years of prison for offending the church and religious feelings. Podlesna challenged the potential conviction, stating, quote, "The immediate impulse for our action was the installation of the Holy Sepulchre, containing homophobic content, located in the Church of St. Dominica in Plock. The church, which claims to be a community of love, exposes such people to hatred, since the high representatives of the episcopate call people the rainbow plague." These arrests are just one of the many injustices LGBTQ+ people faced in Poland. In recent years, the Polish government have targeted sexual minorities and supported organizations that spread homophobia. It continues, however, this month, the president of the European Union has threatened to withhold EU monies to member states that discriminate in word and actions against the LGBTQ community.
And continuing by queering up trans rights. Judge finds Alabama driver's license policy for trans people unconstitutional. A federal judge on Friday ruled that Alabama's driver's license policy with respect to transgender people was unconstitutional. U.S. District Judge Myron Thompson ruled this week in favor of the 3 transgender plaintiffs. The 3 sued the state over its requirements that transgender people get surgery, or a court order that typically requires proof of surgery, to receive a driver's license with their correct gender. Plaintiffs Darcy Corbett, Destiny Clark, and an unnamed third individual sued the state after being denied driver's licenses. They were represented by the American Civil Liberties Union of Alabama. The judge wrote in the decision, quote, "Nearly 50 years ago, the Supreme Court recognized that the Equal Protection Clause demands special skepticism of state actions that impose sex-based classifications. Neither benign justifications nor an absence of discriminatory intent prevents a sex-based law from being subject to this scrutiny," end quote.
You know, one of the things that washed over me most over this story is one of the one of the plaintiffs in the suit. Their first response was, "Well, I'm really glad that I get to drive again." Wow. That trans individual's goal was just to be able to drive a car. That's what discrimination brings in America.
Well, good job, Alabama. I mean, it's about time. Long time coming. Everybody deserves to have an ID that matches their gender identity, plain and simple.
For me, it's really not necessary to go through this amount of discrimination, considering the only thing you need in terms of a driver's license is a card to say that you know how to drive, park in reverse, parallel park, and perhaps drive in the snow should you ever drive out of Alabama up to New York City, where I am based. So kudos to Alabama for getting on board when other states, as we've said, have already gotten on board, and I look forward to the rest of our United States of America doing the same.
Following suit. Absolutely. Well, that's our queer headlines for today. So let's catch up next on the LGBTQ news surrounding COVID-19 with our special segment that we call Quarantine Quickies. Tonight, we report the devastating effect coronavirus has had on the American and worldwide LGBTQ community in total number of cases and deaths. So let's queer up Quarantine Quickies. We must remember Biden-Harris Memorialize COVID-19 victims. Yesterday, another historic moment brought much of the LGBTQ America to a stop. In a week or a month of historic moments, yesterday at 5:30 p.m., a somber memorial was held on the Washington Mall in front of the Capitol to remember the more than 400,000 who have died of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Speeches by both now President Biden and Vice President Harris highlighted the 400 lights around the mile-long reflecting pool to represent the 400,000 who have died so far. The mall also had more than 200,000 American flags to represent today's participation in the inauguration. The memorial was breathtaking, as it was the first in America leading up to today's one-year anniversary of the first case of coronavirus. The failures of President Trump, the White House Coronavirus Commission, and a government structure that weaponized and politicized the response with masks, vaccines, business openings, and the management of pandemic. Noteworthy was that Trump never held a single memorial event for those lost. In fact, he has not even spoken of current actions of the White House relating to pandemic since his defeat on November 3rd, 2020. The images of the memorial to those lost was supported by communities and organizations across America, including ringing of bells at churches, including more than 1,000 locations nationwide, including here at Fort Lauderdale's Sunshine Cathedral.
We will never forget the 400,000 people that we have lost. We just can't. we can't forget. And it just meant so much to see the Freedom Tower lit up in Miami, to see Sunshine Cathedral have a memorial also. And then today, during the inauguration, when Biden stopped and did a prayer for all those lost and all those affected, it really touched my heart.
With the new administration, I feel like this country has finally been able to take a breath and grieve. With this pandemic, there have been a lot of people who've lost not just one family member, but several family members. And speaking as someone who works in the aviation industry, the amount of deaths that have happened, even in my work group, has led to many of us jumping on our computers when a group of 1B opened so that we can get the vaccine in order to participate in public health.
On January 4th, 2020, our first premiere show of Queer News Tonight had a story on an unknown virus that was being reported by the CDC in China. We have reported on COVID-19 in every single show in the last year, every single show. I can tell you today, on Inauguration Day, I finally feel that we may beginning or will be beginning to turn the corner. My hope and my prayer. That is our COVID-19 news for tonight. We have a special interview coming up with Fort Lauderdale's Mayor Dean Trantalis and Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, the senior pastor of the world's largest queer church based here in Fort Lauderdale. We are going to talk about yesterday's COVID-19 memorial and the history of today's inauguration. So we invite you to stay tuned for that. Next, we report that Happening Out Television Network helps support our LGBTQ community. An example is Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. And we are broadcasting from our permanent set in supporting that partnership. The network broadcasts the largest LGBTQ religious broadcast in the world, with more than 30,000 watching every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and it's totally live. We encourage you to tune in. Our campaign of sponsorship proudly supports Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church. Watch this.
Hi, I'm John Romano, LMT. Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this set and this amazing queer church campus possible.
Finally, we thank Queer News Tonight's hotel sponsor, Best Western I-95 Fort Lauderdale. This is the closest and best choice to the famous Wilton Drive, and our hosts and guests stay at this LGBTQ ally partner. We encourage you, me especially, you to stay here when visiting South Florida.
And that's because you're staying there tonight.
I am. I'm enjoying it so much.
Yeah, good. We end tonight's broadcast with the big finish. These are today's silly or news that entertains the LGBT community. So let's move to the big finish. First up, it's official. Oh, darn it. IVANKA and Jared are our new neighbors.
No.
Sigh.
No. We have Donald and West Palm, and them where? Where did they move to? Brickell?
Miami, to Brickell.
Listen, I'm always complaining about my crazy Cuban neighbors that think they could sing on karaoke. All right, I'll take them any day over these two. Any day.
I would even take my mom as a neighbor, and that says a lot considering she's from Texas. But I would like to take my mom as a neighbor for $500.
We need to call the National Guard in because we're now completely surrounded. The gayest place on planet Earth is completely surrounded by the North and now by the South. The big finish. London gets it. The Trump baby blimp, remember that? It has now found a permanent home. Sorry, Britain.
God, but the likeness is uncanny. I mean, it looks just like him. Spitting image.
You know what? Trump is so used to taking up space, and I apologize, Britain, that he's done the same to you. I hope you charge him for some leaves.
You know what's funny about that is Britain wanted that. I know they're going to make fun of it, and there's going to be all kinds of jokes, but the London Museum wanted the baby blimp.
Really?
So you get what you asked for, I guess. That's the
yes.
issue.
Enjoy.
Enjoy. And finally, in the big finish, history yesterday, history today. In the big finish, I asked Donald Trump, would you have run for president if you would have known the disgraceful way it would all end today?
And that's his reaction.
Would he, Taisha?
I mean, no.
No, just flatly.
But I wouldn't be disgraceful. I'm full of grace and poise. So. No.
I just can't help but wonder if he could turn the clock back, he would turn it back and go, nope, I'm not participating.
You think?
I'm sure he's embarrassed, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that he's so far gone that he would do it all again. Like, he's that delusional, guys. Yeah. He is a sick man.
Well, I want to take the blue pill then. Instead of the red pill in the Matrix, I'm taking the blue pill and going back to some false reality then.
Ay, Dios mío. That is today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ evening news show. Is our community important to you?
Well, then help us by liking and subscribing, ring the bell for updates, and sharing this news. We are the only television live video news that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of anchors Faye What and Taisha Best, we will see you daily and tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It's been a good day. Good night, America. You'll want to hear. With us tonight is is two guests actually together. First is the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, of course, a representative of the LGBTQ community, and that is Dean Trantalis. Good evening, Dean.
Good evening.
And the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, and he is our host here at Queer News Tonight because we broadcast from the largest queer church in the world that Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins oversees as senior pastor. Good evening, Durrell.
Hello, so glad to be here.
Well, we're having you here because we do want to talk about COVID. And amazingly enough, today is the anniversary of the first confirmed case of COVID 1 year ago in Seattle and in Washington. And yesterday, there was a very significant memorial event that started at 5:30 p.m. in Washington at the Capitol Mall. And Fort Lauderdale, like many cities across the country, participated in this memorial event. And Sunshine Cathedral is a religious church, an LGBTQ church, participated. And we wanted to talk about it. So Dean, let's start with you. Tell us about the formation of what happened yesterday and what it was all about.
Well, the national party, the federal government, reached out to a lot of local communities and requested that we participate in a nationwide recognition of those people who passed away as a result of the COVID-19 virus. So we sent out a message to all the churches in our community and asked them to ring their church bells. Now, not every church has a bell system, but for those who did, we had very, very good response. And the city of Fort Lauderdale also lit up its beachside garage by the Las Olas Bridge, and even the Bank of America Tower downtown lit up its pyramid dome and the amber lighting that we requested in order to participate in recognition and hopefully in a somber moment that we have reached the 400,000 death mark as a result of this pandemic. I mean, it's frightening to think that we're still not over this disease, and many, many more will continue to die. But at least we finally get recognition at the national level that that there is a disease and it is killing people, and we need to keep going and trying to spread this vaccine throughout the country.
Yeah, in last night's show, we reported very specifically on the effects of COVID-19 in the LGBTQ community, and estimates are we have crossed the 28,000 number of LGBT Americans that have died because of COVID-19. So Mayor Trantalis reaches out and challenges the entire community here in what we always affectionately say is the gayest place on planet Earth. And Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins and the Sunshine Cathedral is one of the many organizations that respond. Durrell, tell us about what Sunshine Cathedral did and how you participated.
Well, we have so many things going on the campus. We have a big chime in the garden, so we originally thought we may do it in the garden last night, but because there's so much, we didn't want it to be interrupted, and we didn't want to interrupt anyone else's activities either. So what we did was on Sunday, as part of our liturgy, we did it on Sunday, recorded it, and then played that last night at the time at 5. So it was like we did it on Sunday, we sort of did it again then online. Yesterday at 5:30. So what we did was just in our liturgy, it was Martin Luther King Sunday, so it's a day of remembrance anyway. It was right before the inauguration, and so we just had so much on our mind, so we just enfolded all of that along with the COVID losses, and we just included it in our liturgy. We prayed about it, and then at the end of our special invocation for that, we did the chimes, and it was very haunting, and of course followed by silence, and it was a powerful way, just in the church setting, to remember, to pray, and to have a catharsis. And then I was amazed at how farther and deeper it went when I watched it last night. Because I watched it online, just like an observer, and then we switched to the news to see all of that. And just to know that people all over the nation, in lots of ways, with lights, with candles, with bells, with chimes, we're observing this moment together. It was the most unifying and cathartic and healing thing we've had in this country in a long time, in my opinion.
You know, that's one of the things that's most interesting to me about what the city of Fort Lauderdale and Sunshine Cathedral did. Queer News Tonight came on the air. Our premiere episode was January 4, 2020. From that first episode, on that first night, we reported on this, at the time not called COVID-19, on this strange new virus that was being reported in China. And we have reported on it in every single episode in over a year. What shocks me, and the irony of what Fort Lauderdale and Sunshine and the nation did yesterday, is that in reporting it every single day, how is it possible that on the last day of the administration and on the eve of the new inauguration, is it that we've had our first national memorial of so many lost? How was this possibly, how could it have possibly unwound this way?
Well, obviously, we have suffered from the neglect that the federal government has imposed upon us over these many months. The CDC and other federal departments have done their best to try to work with the American people in order to assure their protection, sending out protocols for wearing face masks and keeping socially distant, as we are here in the studio. But unfortunately, that alone is not enough. There needs to be national directive. There needs to be a call to arms, so to speak, trying to energize and excite the people of this country to comply, because compliance is really the most important thing. I saw a graph yesterday of the infection rate of Florida and the infection rate of California. And California continues to close restaurants, continues to shelter in place, continues to create tremendous restrictions on its people. And throughout the entire past 3 or 4 months during which all this occurred, the infection rate skyrocketed. In Florida, where our governor started to open everything up, our infection rate creeped up slowly and far away from what the infection rate is in California. So it's compliance, it's personal responsibility. And how do you get that? You try to create a culture within within our country and in our neighborhoods to say, hey, do the right thing. Be responsible to yourself and to your neighbor, and don't go around without a mask, and don't go around infecting other people. We still cite people. In the last month or so, we've cited over 40 businesses. We've fined a couple of places even as much as $15,000 for non-compliance. Even to this day, it's happening. So it's all about personal responsibility, and it's all about seeking direction and the signal from the national leadership that this is the way we need to move forward.
And Reverend Watkins, I'm curious from your perspective, from your pastor of the largest queer church in the world, just from an ethical and moral standpoint, from your perspective, how could we get to this being done nationally as a memorial to the 400,000 dead just yesterday? How is that possible?
Well, that's exactly the point I want to raise, is that yes, leadership involves working with the medical authorities and the science and getting good information out. Not that all of that happened the way some of us would have liked, but that is one level of leadership. But there's also part of moral and compassionate leadership is that you do acknowledge the fallen, that you do help people process their grief, that you do sort of try to help people find hope in hopeless situations. And we have not had that sort of leadership at a national level in a very long time. I think moments of crisis reveal who we are as leaders, but even just as individuals. And this was a crisis that revealed that we didn't have the kind of leadership we needed for such a crisis. Wow. What we needed, as much as science, was compassion and empathy, and we just didn't have that. Yeah. And then last night, because there is a change, we have different personalities into the mix now, and we finally took a moment to grieve together and to love each other through this heartache.
Yeah, we followed the lead of the city of Fort Lauderdale and Sunshine, and we did a tribute last night in Queer News Tonight, and we will continue to extensively talk about it. So in that lack of political leadership and the lack of ethical and moral leadership, then we had a dramatic event today, which is the inauguration of a new...
Did that happen today?
Yeah, the big news today. What did y'all think about what we watched with the inauguration of President Biden? Gosh, that's the first time I've said that. President Biden and Vice President Harris. What did y'all think about?
I've said it all day like a mantra.
Well, obviously, this was a tale of two countries here, because today many people thought we're finally turning the page, and there were many other people whose stomachs were turned today. There are a lot of people who were upset and frustrated and felt that the election was stolen from them and that their leader was deposed unfairly, when the rest of the country feels like it can now take a breath of fresh air and feel that we can finally get back to normalcy, that this experiment with Trump populism was something that wrecked the country, not improved the country. So we're going to see different points of view. We're going to continue to see that friction in politics as well as in our communities is not going away just because the President Trump is no longer president. The entire Trump clan has now moved to Florida, so I'm sure we'll see a lot more activity here. No one has moved to Broward County, thank God. But you haven't seen the end of these folks, and the reason is because they uncovered a part of America that all of us thought didn't exist. And so just because an election has occurred, it doesn't mean that movement is not going to find or rear its ugly head in other ways. So let's be careful, let's be cautious, but let's be forthright in trying to go back and change America on the right path, to resume the values that we all cherished all these many years, and to reconnect with our communities abroad, and to once again try to make the quality of life here in America good for everybody.
Yeah. And Dr. Watkins, your thoughts about what you watched today?
Al, the mayor said that we have two Americas, and what we noticed also is that we have two spiritual camps. And so we've had, for these last several years, a very right-wing, militant sort of brand of spirituality, talking about who to be against and who to leave out, and how to enforce things through the judiciary or whatever. But my grandmother used to say about anything that mattered, I can show you better than I can tell you. And today we saw a different spirituality demonstrated, shown to us. And so we saw non-sectarian silent prayer. We heard voices of compassion. We saw grace in action. People who tried to block the new president's certification were welcomed onto the dais today, not to speak, to be present. That I saw Senator Cruz there. At first I was angry, and then I thought, well, of course he's there, because this is a new way of leadership. This is grace in action. Yeah. And so I was relieved to not hear a lot of religious rhetoric being weaponized, but instead seeing spirituality demonstrated with love, with compassion, with hope, with optimism, with accountability, and with grace. And so that's my hope today.
You know, from a political standpoint, for the city, and from an ethical and moral standpoint from the church, I've heard so many of my friends today say how emotional what they have watched in the last 2 days has been for them, especially today in the inaugural. Did you all have the same reaction in terms of the emotional heart of what we were watching? We were watching protocol and ritual, but how did it land on you emotionally?
Well, clearly for those who supported President Biden and Kamala Harris, it was a wonderful moment for all of us. You know, it shouldn't take this much effort to elect the president and vice president. We shouldn't have to go through so much, you know, pain and suffering and destruction and death just to elect the president in this country. And yet we have now experienced a new era in election politics, and it saddens me to think that that's going to be the new way in which we run for office. And even in my own recent re-election, people were really indifferent to respect and norms, name calling, and people attacked me personally. It was just so uncalled for. And yet that seems to be what the former administration encouraged, because it was a way of life for them. It was a way to try to secure victory for them, and it didn't work. And President Trump lost the White House, lost the Senate, had lost the House 2 years ago. I mean, what gains were really made for the Republican Party? I think they need to do some serious introspection and to realize that method of republicanism is not sustainable for their party. So hopefully we'll see some change. But I'll tell you, while you and I may think we can sit back and say, okay, the country's in good hands, there are going to be a lot of effort
sobering reminder.
Try to undo every day. What did Mitch McConnell say when Barack Obama was elected president the first time? What Mitch McConnell said, what the agenda was for the Senate was to make President Obama a one-term president. And that is not going to stop.
Yeah.
Al, 2 Wednesdays ago, the secular temple of our democracy was desecrated. And that was horrifying to watch in real time. And just I was incredulous, as the country was. And this wasn't an invasion from enemies foreign. This was an invasion from enemies domestic. And it was horrifying. And then last Wednesday, 1 week later, for the first time in history, a president was impeached for the second time. Only the third president to be impeached, and the first one to be impeached twice in one term. And then the Wednesday after that, we saw the transition of power. We heard hope. We heard kindness. And so I think it landed so powerfully for me today, because the last 2 Wednesdays have been horrifying and devastating, and today was a very different kind of Wednesday. And so it was like, thank God, the streak was broken. So yeah, the 4 years, the 8 years, the 12 years, the 16 years ahead, there's a lot of cleaning up to do and a lot of change that needs to be made, obviously, in our attitudes and how we treat one another. But today was an honest attempt to begin that process, and that just felt healing to a lot of us.
Yeah. One last question to both of you. Mayor Trantalis, you represent one of the largest cities in the country, certainly with one of the largest LGBTQ populations in the country, and Dr. Reverend Watkins, you represent the leadership of the largest queer church in the world. From what we watched yesterday in the memorial of COVID and what we watched today in the inauguration, what's going to be next for the LGBTQ community? What would you tell our LGBTQ community with the events that we've seen. This is what to pay attention to and what's next for us.
Well, we got ourselves a cabinet secretary, so that's
did.
exciting, and an assistant secretary also.
A trans assistant secretary.
You know, and the thing is that these are important milestones. You know, it all takes baby steps in terms of social and political change, and these are important things. We supported Pete from the very beginning, and whether he decided to continue the effort to the end or not, it was all about, you know, elevating who we are, our community, trying to allow the world to see who we are and the great successes that we can achieve for everybody through our efforts and through our skills and our background. So I'm excited over what's going to happen over the next 4 years. I feel that we have someone in the president's seat who has tremendous experience, knows the Senate, knows the House, knows the world, and will make the right decisions. And so, and he's got a partner as a vice president who will also be there behind him, supporting him, and together they will collectively lead America in the right direction. Now, will they have competing interests from the opposing party? Of course they will. But I think they'll be able to finesse the country in a way that will ultimately achieve the great success that I know we're going to, and I'm excited about it.
That's good.
When the president was vice president a few years ago, he was, even unbeknownst to a lot of us at the time, was an effective advocate for marriage equality. He was doing things behind the scenes that made what later came to fruition possible, changing minds within even his own party and administration. And so that's who's president now. He was that far ahead several years ago. And so that's who's president now. And when you look at the government that he's leading, his cabinet, his appointees, it is the most diverse group of leaders we've ever had. So I am comforted and encouraged by his commitment, not only to just decency in general, but to inclusion and fairness and justice and diversity. And so because I think that's who he is, and I think that's who he wants what the government to be. I think that's going to be good news for LGBTQ plus people and for all people. It doesn't mean everything's going to happen just our way at just the moment we want, but we're going to go back to going in the right direction of everyone getting a fair shake, everyone getting acknowledged, everyone having their dignity affirmed and recognized. And that's something we've been missing for a few years, and I really believe it's back.
Yeah. Well, we'll let that be the last word. I thank both of you for joining Queer News tonight, this evening, in this history-making. Certainly, you both have characterized it: history-making day, history-making week, history-making month. And likely it's going to be a history-making year. Yesterday's memorial that both Fort Lauderdale and Sunshine Cathedral participated in to recognize the loss of 400,000 people in this pandemic and 28,000 LGBTQ Americans, and the inauguration of what's going to be next from President Biden and Vice President Harris. So thank you both very much. From Fort Lauderdale, Mayor Dean Trantalis and Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins of Sunshine Cathedral.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here tonight. And let's hope for a great 2021.